here is a shocking fact for you. Nearly 51% of Londoners currently don't take part in sport. Believe it or not, that's actually a lower percentage than the national average of 53.4%. But it does still represent a huge number of Londoners that are not enjoying the benefits of being active. So, cue ClubWorks. It's a programme managed by London Sport and funded by the Mayor of London. And it's designed to help support clubs and organisations develop in the capital, getting 1 million Londoners more active by 2020. So here to tell us more about it and preview a special evening this Tuesday related to its work is Chris Scott, who's Head of Corporate Communications at London Sport. Hello, Chris. How are you?
Hi, I'm very well, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
No, of course, it's a pleasure. Just tell us more about ClubWorks then and kind of how it came about and what exactly it is all about.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it is a project run by London Sport and funded by the Mayor of London, and it's part of a much wider ambition around getting these million Londoners more active by 2020. So the project really got started about 2 years ago, and in that time it supported over 300 grassroots clubs across London. And that's kind of everything from traditional sport clubs, you know, football, hockey, tennis, whatever it might be, through to a range of kind of more, I guess, unusual activities that are designed to support Londoners that maybe aren't so interested in traditional sport. So things like chair dancing or Tai Chi or adapted sport, I guess things which are there to kind of meet the different needs, because if we think about Londoners, it is an incredibly diverse range of people. So anything that we can do to help new clubs emerge that can support the different needs of different types of Londoners is hopefully a really positive step towards getting more people into sport and, as you say, kind of enjoying the benefits of being active.
What is activity then? I mean, what would you define as activity that people aren't? Because that's sometimes a problem, isn't it? Because it's a perceptional thing. People go, "Oh God, I've got to put on a running vest and go and do, you know, a sub 4 minute mile."
Yeah, I think you're right, Phil. It can be a real kind of issue for people thinking that sport can be something very competitive or very strenuous, and actually, being active can begin at a much kind of more elementary level. Even things as basic, and this wouldn't typically count as kind of formal activity, but even something as basic as getting off the bus to stop early and walking to work rather than kind of taking public transport the whole way, that all plays a massive role. Where something like ClubWorks comes into it, it tends to be something that moves more into structured physical activity. So a session which might raise your heart rate a bit, get you sweating a little bit, but not so much that it's necessarily going to make you uncomfortable. I mean, of course, for a lot of people, what they want from sport is to be really kind of really strenuously active and get into the competitive side, and that's terrific, and it has a real sort of positive role to play. But a lot of other things that are kind of more, I guess, sort of almost more socialised activity goes to sport. So things like dance and a lot of the things we've seen sort of come out of the sort of gym and fitness class areas, those don't necessarily have to be incredibly difficult and incredibly challenging, but they're all something which does contribute to physical health, to mental well-being. And from our perspective, those are all things which are really, really important.
I guess that is the beauty of this, isn't it? Because if you break the stats even further down, which were quite shocking, it's quite a high percentage, isn't it? But particularly women, 56% of women in London don't take part in sport, and 71% of disabled people apparently not taking part in sport. But yeah, I was just going to say, you've touched on it already, but this is the beauty, I guess, of this scheme, because as Phil said, it's not necessarily slinging on a running vest. It's not necessarily what you think of as sport, as football, rugby, swimming. But we'll move on shortly to Tuesday night and these films. But it's also things like Tai Chi, isn't it? Or yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely right. It really is kind of anything and everything that you might think about when you think about the things you could do to be a little bit more active. I think you're absolutely right to look at some of those data and statistics you pulled out there. There are some pretty shocking discrepancies in the different rates in which people become active, and I think particularly for disabled Londoners, being physically active can be a real challenge, not necessarily motivationally, but just because the kind of structure and the support isn't there to enable it. A big part of London Sport's role is to try and make sure that actually we're understanding those concerns, that we're addressing those issues, and that we are able to support groups that want to find a way to enable more people of every background, of every circumstance to be active. And hopefully ClubWorks is playing its part in supporting that.
How much of it is down to accessibility or perception of accessibility or safe spaces where people can partake in sport?
I think it's different for different groups. I don't think there's any kind of single answer and single solution that will solve all of the problems. But I think we'd be doing ourselves a disservice, and we'd be doing Londoners a disservice if we didn't take seriously the fact that some people need different environments, have different access needs. And in all honesty, in the past, perhaps the sports sector as a whole hasn't been terrific at understanding that and dealing with it. There's a lot more good work going on now, and certainly in London, there's a real kind of directive from a number of different areas, whether it's the Mayor of London, whether it's central government and Sport England, to kind of say, we need to better understand this. We need to, I guess, be more aware of what needs to be done. These aren't short solutions. This isn't going to be a quick fix. But over a sort of period of years, the steps that we take now should begin to have a big impact on people's perceptions of sport, their ability to get involved in sport, and hopefully those sort of steps we take at this stage can really pay off as we move into sort of 2020, 2021 and onwards.
So you have this special night happening on Tuesday. Is it a kind of a collaboration between the work then that London Sport are doing with ClubWorks and a film company? Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So we're really pleased to have partnered up with a film company called Chocolate Films, who run a project called 1,000 Londoners, which is basically using film to tell the story of 1,000 Londoners in their daily lives. We partnered with them on a series called London Moves Me series. It basically looks at the lives of 5 different Londoners, all of whom are in some way involved in the ClubWorks programme, getting involved in one of the projects that is supported through ClubWorks. But basically, it gives a little snapshot into their lives and the role that being active has in their lives. And as you say, on Tuesday, we've got a cinema screening. We're proud to have our very first showings of these films at the Ritzy in Brixton. And it's really just a way of, I guess, celebrating the really diverse array of ways that people can choose to be active. It's not something that's kind of standing over people, hopefully with a big stick, saying you must be active, it's the right thing for you. It's much more about saying, look, this can be really fun, this can be a really integral part of people's lives, and it can actually be something which isn't so difficult to get into. So the films are really about celebrating that, and being part of the 1,000 Londoners series, it really goes into a bit of depth in those 5 Londoners' lives, and we're really proud to work with them on this. We think it's a really strong series of films, and we're looking forward to kind of getting those out into the public eye, and Tuesday's just the first step for that, really.
OK, Chris, well, if you stay with us, I think we can have a little taster of Tuesday. So here now is Rochelle's story as told by Chocolate Films.
As a child, I would say I was very shy. I would be more reserved and keep to myself. I would say the opposite to my brother, for example. He was more of the outgoing type of person, whereas I was the more quiet type. I was first introduced to basketball when I was around 5 years old. My brother and I were introduced to the sport through a family friend, and he took us to the basketball court. I play in an all-women's group who are part of the team Soul, and we train every Thursday. My parents, at first, they didn't really think that I should play basketball because it wasn't, well, for them it wasn't considered really ladylike. When they told me that, I felt very discouraged. It somehow blew out the flame in me, and for a while I actually stopped playing basketball, and it reverted me back to my shy self. But then in the following years, when they saw that playing basketball makes me happy, it makes me feel like I can achieve things or be the best that I can be, then they eventually came to the point of supporting and saying, oh yeah, she can do it. The advice I would give to any young girl in this generation who wants to do something that is not really considered ladylike, I would say just go for it. No matter what anyone says, the only person that you have to satisfy is yourself.
So that's Rochelle's story. Chris, it's truly inspirational, but I guess that's all part of it, isn't it? Ultimately, you want to inspire 1 million Londoners to be more active by 2020. Yeah,
that's exactly it. And I have to say, I absolutely love Rochelle's story. I think this kind of message that she leaves the viewer with is something quite powerful. And, obviously she's talking kind of very specifically from her own experience, but there's kind of something quite universal about that as well. I think the sort of empowerment that you feel with it is something kind of very genuine. It is very inspirational. I think, London is a really fortunate city in a lot of ways. There are a huge number of opportunities out there, and in the sport world, we have seen so many great kind of sporting moments pass through the city, even in the last kind of 5-10 years. I think what we now get to do is really look at real people and people that, their goal, their ambition might not be to take part in the most competitive elite sport in the world, but they're still getting something really powerful out of it. And I think Rochelle sums it up way better than I ever have, actually.
And just quickly, Chris, I think people can watch these films online, can they? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So after we've done cinema screenings with them this month, they'll be being launched online via the 1000 Londoners project. So they basically release 1 or 2 films every week. So we won't be putting them all out there at once. We're doing a little series of them. They'll be coming out sort of around about October and into November this year. And if people are interested in watching them, if they go to the 1000 Londoners website, or if they go to London Sport's website, which is londonsport.org, we'll be pointing people in their direction. And we kind of hope as many people get to see them as possible, really, because anything that can encourage people to maybe think that sport could be for them, then that's kind of mission accomplished for us.
Well, smashing stuff. Thanks ever so much for joining us. That's Chris Scott there on behalf of London Sport, who are working with the Mayor of London on a project, ClubWorks, that's aiming to get 1 million Londoners more active by 2020. Fancy a bit of Tai Chi, Phil?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. There's someone in my local park who does a little bit of Tai Chi. Oh, no, it's a Thai takeaway. Sorry. But no, they do. There's a chap down there who does a little bit, so that's quite good. That was a really cheap joke, wasn't it? Let's face it. The only thing we could ask is that we're 5 years on from, and maybe those people responsible for the Olympics who gave it LLL, legacy all the time, and the fact that we are still not getting enough people active, maybe we should trace it back and see whether actually that was something that wasn't picked up enough at that moment in time, but organisations like London Sport are trying to make sure that we do it now. So get out there, be active, and it can be simple, or it could be something more complicated, and it doesn't matter what age you are as well. I mean, that's the other factor. People doing things at different ages. Get out there and get active.